My previous video on Maoism was bad, and I'm having a manic episode right now, so I'm remaking it and releasing this video from rehab. Maoism, also called Marxism Leninism Maoism, is, unsurprisingly, based on the ideas of Marxism and Leninism. It was developed by Mao, as you could guess, during the Chinese Civil War. Essentially, Western nations spent the entire 1800s fucking with less developed nations like China, destabilizing it and causing a civil war with about 200 factions. And in the middle of that, Japan invaded as well. So they put the civil war on pause to fight off the fascist Japanese, and afterwards the civil war went on with two main factions, that being the communists under Mao and the Kuomintang under Shen shek. TLDR Mao won, and Shen shek occupied Taiwan while pretending he is the real China. Mao inherited a very hard job. China was completely plundered by the imperialist nations. It was called the Century of Humiliation. Essentially, what the Europeans did was use their gunpowder weapons to create large empires for profit, plundering the natural resources of other countries and enslaving the population. This is known as imperialism, in which one nation, like France, conquered half of Africa to plunder its resources. While China itself was not colonized by a nation, its economy was. So Mao developed his ideas to reach a form of socialism under these conditions. Under Leninism, you have an educated elite supported by industrial workers taking over the state and then educating the common worker about socialism. China did not have an educated elite or an industrial working class, so that wasn't gonna work. So Mao adapted it. Instead of industrial workers, it would be rural farmers who would carry the revolution. And instead of an educated Marxist ruling class, it would be the People's Liberation Army that would lead the revolution. Of course, China was still suffering from imperialism, and Mao had to do something about it. He eventually decided on a very controversial plan. He would ally with the small-scale Chinese capitalists to fight off the foreign capitalists, so China would be independent. And then he would let the Chinese capitalists, also called the national bourgeoisie, develop the industry. And once China had the standards of an industrialized nation, the state would seize the industry in the name of the people, followed by spreading the revolution to more countries. Mao thought this was the only way a revolution could happen, because he was convinced that the working class in rich countries like Germany, France, and the UK was bribed by the capitalists at the cost of the colonies. That means, for example, the capitalists would build a sweatshop in India and then sell the products to the first world workers. And these workers would then have an elevated standard of living, which meant that they wouldn't want a revolution since their life was okay, based on the suffering of the people of colonized nations. When Mao won the Civil War, he did a lot of things. First of all, he declared the People's Republic of China. Then he noticed that barely anyone could read or write, because Chinese had about 1 trillion characters, so he created simplified Chinese to make it easier to improve literacy. Mao first aligned with the Soviet Union, as they were socialist comrades, but they eventually drifted apart in what is known as the Sino-Soviet split. China at this time was very much an agrarian society. Almost everyone worked in the fields. Mao launched a campaign of rapid industrialization in the 50s and 60s, which meant he took farmers from the fields and put them into the industrial cities, known as the Great Leap Forward. Because of this, the remaining farmers had to work more land, which was possible because Mao provided them with industrial farm equipment, as well as new neat farming techniques like deep plowing and close planting, which they had learned from a Soviet researcher. And all the techniques failed to work and destroyed the harvest. And now millions of people are starving. Oops. More details in my China video. So that was not great. Mao also established a policy of autarky, seeking to trade as little as possible, kinda like current-day North Korea. Mao also created backyard furnaces for some cursed reason, but I can't really figure out what he intended those to be used for. There was also a one-child policy, which was the government's attempt to accelerate the demographic transition. There are many criticisms of this ideology. For example, it's morally questionable to lead the people to a socialist revolution and then telling them to work for the national bourgeoisie. And of course, any libertarian leftist or anarchist will point out that a centralized state and economy like that is pretty authoritarian. If you want to know more about how China works right now, I have a video on that topic for you. Also, Mao ignored the mass killings of landlords, which happened under his rule. Personally, I think there should never be a death penalty, no matter the crime. So I think this was a very bad thing that should have not happened. In conclusion, Maoism states that industrialized nations are not capable of revolution because the working class was bribed, so the revolution must occur in an occupied, underdeveloped, colonized nation using the help of the local capitalists to liberate the nation, industrialize, and eventually reach a form of state-run socialism and spreading it to the world. Thanks for watching. I made this video the week before I went to rehab because I'm motivated right now, and I'm making videos to release while I'm in rehab so you don't have to suffer a lack of Wiki 1999 videos. Thanks to all my lovely Patreons. Bye!